Hey there, welcome to episode 77 of the FFS Talk audio program. I'm your host, Dan Hugo. We're recording this at about 10:40 in the morning on Thursday, May 15, 2025. Today's episode, Bug Fixes and Performance Improvements. Where have you seen that written before? If you're not familiar with the FFS Talk audio program, it is intended to be a dialogue or conversation. We've had 77 episodes, including this one, of monologue of audio essay, setting that up with so many potential topics for discussion. The basic idea, let's talk about what works, what doesn't, and what we might do to change the parts that don't work. Hopefully not change the parts that do. Kind of like discussing what bug fixes and performance improvements could be applied to the things that don't work, with hopes that we don't break things. But not intended to be a meta title today. That's the general focus of the show. The various audio essays during the previous episodes have essentially been, like I said, setting up potential discussions. Getting suggestions for what we might do from one person might be interesting, but it's that the debate, the conversation, the bouncing back and forth of ideas is where things can get interesting. So that's the general idea. So we'll see if we can attract some guests at some point, maybe in season 2, which is coming up in fewer than 30 episodes. If you're not familiar, by the way, with what FFS means, it is an expression I heard many times in Ireland. If you don't know what it is, maybe you should hang out with more Irish people. And hopefully wherever you found this audio program, you're able to locate the episode description, which contains the show notes, a summary that I will read, and the links associated with today's episode. There are 4 shameless self-promotion links and 1 Wikipedia link. So let's get started so we can get finished. The summary of today's episode. How many times has this happened to you where you receive a notification of some kind to update your software, your computer, your phone, and all you know is that you will receive bug fixes and performance improvements by going through the update process? Does that work out every time? Spoiler alert, not always, but we're not going to get into too many specifics here. We've all been there. We know. The links for today's episode, the shameless self-promotion links, are in 2 groups. buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo is one of my engagement tools to reach out and connect with my audience. That's you. You're under no obligation to spend any money at either of these sites. Buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo provides a profile page with links to my various audio programs, various initiatives, organizations in which I'm pursuing initiatives and projects and whatnot. Some affiliate links to my favorite coffee beans, Coffee Does Power, all of the things you hear, and some other stuff, some biographical information up top. And Buy Me an Update, published exclusively through the Buy Me a Coffee website, is a microcast published on Mondays. Goes very briefly, in 5 minutes or less, over the previous week's audio programs and any news and announcements for the near future. Available every Monday. Visit www.buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo/posts. Also linked from the profile page. The second pair, Ko-fi.com, ko-fi.com/DanHugo. That is my engagement page of another kind. Ko-fi, I always pronounce it like that to emphasize that it is not a normal spelling. Ko-, that's the key next to the 0 on your keyboard. fi.com/DanHugo. And you can check out a recently launched program, the Coffee Solo, at ko-fi.com, ko-fi.com/DanHugo/posts. It is a non-periodic, it's just whenever, not topic constrained, could be about whenever, audio program. I think they've been anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour. I think there's about 5 episodes up there so far, preparing for the eventual proper launch of Hugo Floss, which will be somewhat similar, but more. Again, no obligation to spend any money at either of those platforms. If you do, however, it will go towards coffee, which is indeed what powers all of my endeavors. Don't tell my bank that. OTA updates, that's over the air. Wikipedia page that goes over some of the details of what that actually is. You've probably experienced it. You know, you get a little notice on your phone. You do the update, you reboot your phone, it does some more things, and then hopefully it works better. If it doesn't reboot, maybe that's bad. It's happened. Who has not been through that? So yeah, you can read about that. Some more and more things that are connected to the internet are receiving OTA updates. That could be a good or bad thing. So let's get on with the show. To update or not to update? That is the question. Thank you, Mr. Shakespeare. Perhaps the most well-known update on the horizon as we record today is the Windows 10 forced upgrade to Windows 11 coming on. It's nice that they give you a specific date, October 14, 2025. Oh, that's fast approaching. If you are using Windows 10, you will need to upgrade to Windows 11. And I'm going to guess Microsoft will do whatever it can to make that happen automatically. Though it appears that you can avoid that fate a bit longer, sort of. If you are sticking with Windows 10, Microsoft is going to support their Microsoft 365 tools for another year. Aren't you lucky? But not the operating system, which is weird. Now, I am not a Windows person. I have used Windows in a workplace setting. When I worked at Intel, for example, actually I had to use not all, but 3 different operating systems. So Windows, Mac OS, and Linux, because the Arduino development tools ran on all 3, which is good. So we had to support all 3. Windows is its thing. It's got a huge, ginormous corporate following just because of maintenance and so on. So forcing this upgrade for business users would be not unreasonable. They pay people to do those sorts of things, but forcing it on your relatives, your friends, people who might be calling you at some point and saying, "Hey, my computer stopped working. What's going on? Do you know?" I'm anticipating a couple of those, maybe 1 or 2. The Windows 10 to Windows 11 forced upgrade is a matter of company budgeting for supporting legacy systems. Do they want to continue to pay for that, or do they want to push everybody into the present? This has happened on a variety of platforms or through time. We are no longer supporting fill in the blank. So there, they don't necessarily force you, but they, whoever they are, say, well, you're going to have to update because the thing you depend on now is not going to work anymore. Or it will stop working eventually, or we're just not going to support it anymore and it will run out of gas on its own, or whatever the case is. A variety of scenarios. Generally speaking, anyone who uses modern digital technologies will face an offer to update their device, often over the air, but occasionally via some intermediate connected device. Like maybe you need to plug it in, whatever the thing is, into a laptop or desktop, for example. Maybe you use your phone and you update it via a Bluetooth connection. There are a variety of ways to do this. So as long as you can eventually get to the internets, no longer shipping floppy disks or other media, so vastly cheaper to apply these updates. And then they just have to deal with an update or application sometimes. But generally speaking, it is vastly more economical to send updates to you over the internet, over the air, which means it is now easier to ship things that are not quite done or that need some work. Like we got to ship it by this date, but then we can release the point release. We can apply bug fixes every month as Android, as Google does for their Android devices. I don't know what I have an Android device, so I don't know what Apple does with the iPhone, but basically it's easy enough. Your phone is always connected to the internet. They always know, what you're doing, what you're wearing, what you're saying. So they can always pick that ideal time to cause you a headache. There's always that question, though. Is it worth doing? Is it worth updating my phone right now? Is it worth updating my laptop? Should I do the Windows 11 upgrade? What's that going to do for me or to me? Of course, in some cases, it isn't whether it might be worthwhile, but is this update going to alter usability, remove functionality, or even disable my device, usually called bricking? Oh, my phone got bricked, as in it got turned into a brick. Door stopping would be probably even more historically relevant, but not as easy to say. So if your device becomes less and you depend on it for some important, even critical uses, then what? That would be bad if it stops working. Yeah, that's no good. So testing beforehand, this is kind of a touchy subject, perhaps. I myself have been in the tech world for about 30 years now. True story. In one way or another. So sometimes in the lab working on products, sometimes out in the field working at hackathons and interacting with developers and our customers. sometimes talking to my customers for things I'm working on, and so on and so on. So it's a lot of engineering, a few consumer products in there somewhere, both hardware and software. And I even started my career in QA, my first days entering the Silicon Valley marketplace right after the recession of 1992, I guess. So into 1993, we had the internets were coming on strong. I got my first job doing some benchmarking in QA on video cards, and then I started working at Apple QA, Apple Quality in Mariani 1 in Cupertino in, I think it was October. I think it was October. No, I think it was probably November 1993. Yeah, somewhere in there. So that was quality assurance, it's just which is specifically about testing to make sure the thing works, whatever it is. And of course, to keep track of the parts that do not work. So the testing process means I make a note of things that don't work. And then if there's a revision internally, like we're developing the next release, then I test it again and I see what doesn't work and you fixed this one. And occasionally the development people, whoever they are, will say, oh, this should address that issue that you located, or this should address that problem, or this is a new thing. You have to make sure it didn't break anything, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a whole process, and it can be quite tedious. It can be time consuming, and it can be expensive, especially keeping track of the parts that don't work, because sometimes those become a real problem later. I will say it has been hit or miss. Some company cultures are better than others when it comes to releasing well-tested versus just tested products to their customers. And again, the whole notion of a point release, I've literally heard this, and it may or may not have been at that fruit company. We'll release it now, or we'll stop development on the release that is coming. We're going to push it out in 2 weeks or something, and we'll start work on the point release. So we'll start fixing the bugs that we find. So you can continue testing the release that's coming out in 2 weeks, but just write down the stuff we find and we'll start fixing them in the point release. So you'll receive a product that has known problems, but look forward to that update and those, I don't like that practice, but that's reality for you. By the way, a data loss bug. So if you're a computer company and you are about to ship your new operating system and every once in a while it trashes your hard disk, they're going to stop for that. That's not going to be fixed in a point release. So data loss, data corruption, basically the same thing. And in the case of like a physical object, if it does damage, if it hurts people, if it, if the car starts driving by itself, that's going to be a showstopper. That's not going to get out the door. Or is it? Hope not. A new product or service. Wait, a new product or service, new to the customer anyway. So I've just got this new thing. I've never used it before. It's my brand new phone, my brand new laptop, whatever it is. My new what is it? Electric vehicle, EV. I don't have a car, so who knows? It establishes a baseline. So what you have, okay, it works. It works as well as it works. I am familiar with it. Hopefully it works as advertised, and the user, that's me or you, gains a familiarity with that baseline. So now you develop your own sort of, I know it doesn't work when I hold it near the window. Like it gets too hot or sunlight causes, who knows, whatever the problem is. But you sort of develop a comfort level with this thing, especially if you use it daily or if you depend on it working. So it works as well as it works. When it comes time to apply an update, will the product get better or will it get worse? Let's all take a breath and recall the most recent update of whatever thing was updated. It could be your phone, it could be your computer, whatever it is, that we really needed to continue functioning, but which had a problem. It happens frequently, and I will allege maybe that this is due to a lack of sufficient testing. Those corner cases that nobody thought of internally, or maybe they don't have any or enough personnel, the testing infrastructure, or maybe just a matter of time. Maybe they just didn't have time to cover, called testing coverage. They didn't have time to cover everything. So it happens, and this is unpleasant. It's unpleasant for you when it happens to you. And then hopefully it becomes unpleasant for the company. They shouldn't do such things. In fairness, some things out in the field for long enough, or maybe used in a large variety of variable use cases, will present a real challenge on the testing side. Some scenarios will be unknowns or untestable, or maybe just not common enough to warrant the resource commitment to reach full coverage. What, what might be nice, some transparency in this regard, so that those in less common, less tested groups can be aware of this ahead of time. But this is not often the case. Maybe sometimes there is not a suitable level of awareness of what these groups actually are. Maybe they don't know their users. Now, I will say, when I was working at Apple, in Apple quality, I was working in the API test group at some point. So writing code to test the code that other programmers are using to interact with their computer to write their applications, right? The API test group. We had a room down the hall from where I was sitting, actually. I could literally stick my head out into the hallway from my cubicle, and I could see this lab space. And we had one of each of the Macintosh computers that were shipping that supported the current software. Now, I can't remember if we had an original Mac, a 128K Mac. I'm sorry, 128 Mac 120. What is it? 128 megabytes of RAM. It was megabytes, right? Was it 128K? Let me look that up, because suddenly now I'm like, megabytes were really expensive back then. Original Mac, memory size, 128 kilobytes. Okay, oh my God, that's insane. It has been a while. 128K. I don't know if we had that Macintosh, because it certainly wouldn't run. Maybe it would have. I remember people playing with this on emulators. I don't remember if the original hardware would do it. But the original Mac, 128K, the 512K Mac was probably more likely to work. And then all the products that came from there. So we had one of everything. We could always try out stuff, but you cannot possibly attack the entire product matrix when you start adding on peripherals and, does this hard drive work? Does that hard drive work? Hard drives and data loss go great together. So Apple gets a couple of points for that, although they also released on schedule and started fixing bugs in a point release. So maybe they lose those points again. Speaking of transparency, so the title of this episode is a reference to a certain lack of transparency, which we have all grown to expect, where the changes that might reduce the appeal of whatever it is we are about to update are obscured or dramatically simplified down to a summary that bugs were fixed and performance has been improved. What do these really mean? And I'm not going to answer that, because who knows? That there are bug fixes might be good. Did they, whomever they are, fix my bugs? That's the most important part. Did they fix the things that have been causing me problems, which have not been working, or worse, maybe have led to loss of productivity, loss of data, general loss of function? Have you ever had your phone just automatically reboot by itself without you doing anything? Have you found your phone running extra hot? Have you found it not charging correctly? There are certain things that now I can't use the phone for more than an hour without charging it. These are usual, depending on how new your device is. The battery obviously ages, or maybe you didn't know that. They age, they stop taking a charge as easily and eventually completely. But if your device is relatively new out of the box, these are probably software problems. The charging algorithm can be changed in software. You can update it, you can change it, you can break it. So I applied the update and now my phone only holds a charge for 10 minutes, or it runs so hot I can't keep it in my pocket, or all true stories in my travels. Will I apply this update and all of that will go away? Like maybe my phone, I updated my phone last month and it screwed everything up. And so now they're going to fix all that, right? Hopefully. Or maybe I'll get some new bugs, or maybe nothing will change at all. And you'll have to continue surviving on this. Like, I shouldn't have applied that update. How about the performance improvement? What does that even mean? This could mean new features, or it could mean faster. It could mean brighter or darker, or a longer battery life, or shorter battery life. Or maybe I won't notice any change at all. Maybe the performance improvements apply to particular use cases that affect very few people, not including me. But they still get to say this is an update, and then it provides performance improvements. So is that a good thing? I don't know. They should tell us what that is. Now, in fairness to some companies, this is not universal by any means, but some, especially if they're, an app store or iTunes or whatever, there will be limited space to provide a detailed update. Ideally, they will point you to some release notes or the current version. VS Code, for example, does this. When you update VS Code, they'll point you to the updates page for the current version that you've updated to, and it lists all kinds of stuff that changed. Android, I think, will do this occasionally. I don't remember if they do this consistently, but there will be some sort of release notes, especially if they're addressing a security problem. Those are just two examples. There are too many to go into too much detail about, but do you always know what you're getting when you update? If you were to update to Windows 11 today, what would break for you? What would you have to deal with as a result? Do you even know? Am I getting a performance improvement? Maybe. Am I getting some bug fixes? You're probably just trading some bugs for others. So one of the issues that I have, and I think this is generally true, and you may have noticed it, that the entities that are building things that you use and depend on, they're disconnected from you. Companies, or maybe the entities that are making these things, they're shipping it, they ship updates, and they ship updates now and then, but they're not always connected to their customers and the users. That's us. We are numbers, we are downloads, we are quarterly sales, we are update statistics. Very rarely now this is not universally true. Some companies do promote this, or they do encourage it, but it's not so common that the people developing products for other people interact with those other people, that they actually get to meet or interact with, engage with their users. So they really have no idea what does it mean to depend on my phone? What does that really mean? Some people don't know. Some people don't even think it's a phone anymore. They just think it's a little pocket computer that happens to also make phone calls. Boy, howdy, when you've got to make a 911 call, that all changes. Well, some of this data, all those numbers, and the fact that we're not really people anymore, can be used to develop user or use case profiles against which to test. This really happens. Persona. These are not actually people. If testing is about the product and every user or every users, then failure modes lack a human element. There is no pain felt on the testing side and no perception of the pain felt on the user side if you never know what that is, if you never have to actually see it or talk about it. The best case scenario here is if the people responsible for testing under these conditions also happen to use the product or service, and so they have a personal awareness, at least. Hey, production by street, emergency vehicle, if you heard that. Not always the case, though. So it may be something that's foreign to them, and maybe like a medical device. Boy, I hope they're testing those. Over-the-air updates in the field for medical devices, that's going to be something you want to check on first. In my experience, testing with human elements, that is humans interacting with the product as a means of testing, runs the risk. So doing this sort of testing runs the risk of a demo path, or a path that the tester gets used to following, so that they don't try all the corner cases or the outlandish. Why would anyone do that? So maybe they don't. So all those cases, which can sometimes make headlines later when bricked devices or other substantial problems pop up. And I'll tell a little horror story after this. Similarly, if humans are developing automated test cases, they may do something similar so that the rare cases simply fall off the list or never make it on. When I was working for a chip company in Oregon that will remain nameless, there was a product that it was a new product class that they were shipping, and it was out in the field, and it was being designed into products and so on. And I was in a lab in a country that has an expression that appears in the title of this audio program. And we noticed a certain scenario, USB powered, plugging and unplugging versus having external power. And so we noticed that there was a problem with the physical layer of the USB controller, so that basically your computer, device, whatever, should be aware when something is plugged into it. So in this case, there should have been I cannot remember the name of the thing, but when you plug in a USB, I think it was a micro RSB connector, you're supposed to get an interrupt, a signal that says device plugged in or something, device plug. And that wasn't happening, or that wasn't making it into the software. You couldn't see that signal. So you would think, well, you just kind of know it's plugged in. No, you don't. These are things that the casual observer may not have any awareness of. So because of a bug, now, okay, we didn't know this was a bug yet. We didn't know what the cause was, the root cause. But it was myself and my colleague sitting at a lab bench in a lab plugging stuff. We were doing something else entirely, but we said, hey, wait, why is this doing this? And it happens that some USB analysis hardware, some specialized hardware to test USB devices, happened to be in the lab. They were showing off some hardware to a different group of people on the other side of the lab. It was a big room. I think it was LaCroix is the devices. So bus analyzers and other debug devices and so on. So I said, hey, can you take a look at this real quick? So they wheeled over one of their analyzers. We plugged it in and they saw and they said, oh, it doesn't look like you're getting the plug signal. And again, I don't remember the name of the signal. It has a name. And we can see it, like you're plugging it in. You can see the electrically think the right things are happening, but then you don't get the signal on the other side of your physical layer to actually take action, to say, oh, okay, we have a device plugged in, and to enumerate the bus and do all the other bus init and config and all that stuff. So we spent weeks, I think it was like 6 weeks of daily phone calls around the world. So I was back in Vegas doing these phone calls at some early hour. And so it turns out, and this was not during the group phone call, which had like maybe a dozen or 15 people on it. This was in a one-to-one phone call with someone in another state, one that has a big canyon in it. And he said, I got to be honest, we didn't even test that. And by we, it was that person. That person was responsible for doing the electronics tests, like the electrical signaling. I said, what do you mean? We didn't even test that because it just wasn't important. So we didn't test it. So they shipped a product without being tested and it didn't work. And that happens. That really does happen. And there's no update. There were workarounds and there was an attempt to make it work and so on. The product was eventually killed. We can argue about whether they should have stopped there. So what can we do? Especially because we're paying for this stuff. We buy these products and maybe we pay for updates. Sometimes that can be a thing. But we pay for accessories, we pay for, and then there's opportunity costs, right? We could have paid for a different product that might work better, but no, we paid for this one. We're all in on our iPhone or our Tesla or our Dell laptop, whatever it is. And those are only obvious examples. There are more and more products, gaming consoles, home automation, all kinds of stuff. So what do we do when this stuff goes awry? First of all, we should raise expectations. Ours. Communicate dissatisfaction. I should speak better, really. I'm sure you agree. Not only to the company, but in public forums and just in general. If you encounter an issue that reduces function or even reduces your happiness using a product that you paid for and might really depend on, make it known. Make sure that you don't keep it to yourself. Don't shrug your shoulders. I guess it just doesn't work anymore. That's not acceptable. Updates should not make the things you pay for and depend upon less valuable and less useful. When this happens, the perpetrators, like Google or Apple or whomever it is, and I'm only picking on them because their name's coming to mind immediately, need to be held accountable, not only for being sloppy, but to actually repair the damage done, to actually take action proactively and not do the old, oh, well, we'll do an update next month. Like, hey, you broke this and you tell us to update and then we update and then you do this. This happens. There was one case that happened a few months ago. Google was shipping an update, a monthly update. Android phones have something called user profile. So you can literally have like a home profile and a work profile, or maybe a couple is sharing a device, or maybe it's a backup device, any number of, demo profile, whatever the case is. I've actually set up a demo profile so somebody could borrow my phone, so they get their own little workspace. So they're not going to have access to my stuff. And that was a rare circumstance, but it was easy to do. So if you have set up user accounts at the time, this was maybe a year ago, and you applied the monthly update, it would brick your phone. Your phone would become unusable. What does this mean? It means that somebody didn't test the user profile configuration before, if somebody had the more than one, the base or the default user profile configuration, they apply an update and it bricks their phone. That's something that you would have found very easily and immediately in testing. So, maybe you didn't test it. And that's something Google in that example, should be on the hook for. Absolutely. And that has to be known far and wide because they're screwing over their customers. That's you and me. If possible, keep an eye out before applying an update. So in that case, it's bricking phones. I'm going to hold off until they figure out what's going on. And then they figured it out. It was only a subset of people. But again, if you're in that subset, that's awful. So spend the time beforehand to learn whether others are encountering problems or disappointments. And disappointments could be, battery life is shorter. And people actually pay attention to that stuff, which is great. Hopefully you can find a media outlet of some kind or one or more people who take an active interest, a pedantic approach to doing this, and even maybe technically competent execution of tests and comparisons and so on to try out. There's a weather update, a weather advisory, wind here in Vegas, if you heard that Amazon noise. So they're taking a pedantic approach, and hopefully they will do this with a technically competent execution of their tests and reporting in a useful way. So when they try out updates and changes on their collection of devices, they often have a few. You never know if they're going to get bricked. They'll evaluate the changes and report the results in a useful way. And you can benefit from that. And it's more and more common now, particularly with mobile phones, because everybody has them. There are people that are big fans of Samsung or Motorola or whoever's still making phones nowadays. And so you'll get fans of devices. You'll get fans of the operating system. So you'll get an Android focus. You'll get an iPhone or an iOS focus. You'll get an iPhone 16 Pro versus a Samsung. So they'll compare things, compare features versus updates. And so there are people that really dive into this stuff. And sometimes this will happen with non-phone devices, more and more common now. So these are good things. Maybe even with vehicles. I don't have a Tesla, but I'm sure there are Tesla fans out there that are keeping track of everything. And then you should support more of this if you can, especially if it's products that are interesting to you or important to you, because those people are taking some risk on your behalf so that you know what's happening and you don't get bitten. I've been bitten by device failures. Some of them would not have been known. If you are familiar with the Nexus 4, not a Blade Runner character, but a phone from Google, I had 3 devices brick, and they did what's called a boot loop. So they weren't truly bricked, but it would never boot up far enough to even do anything. So it would boot up, it would fail, reboot itself, and that's it. So never useful. This happened one time when I was downtown in Las Vegas. My phone bricked itself, or got into a boot loop mode just randomly. And I'm like, oh, now I can't get a Lyft or Uber. So I took a cab home and it cost me like $50. And I told them, I said to Google support, hey, this failed when I was out and about and I couldn't get home. I mean, that's the world we live in, right? I got to have a phone in order to travel anywhere. But they actually gave me a courtesy credit. So I guess points for that, but we should have never had that problem. So the Nexus 4 became a known issue eventually. And like I said, I had 3 devices. It may have been 4, but I definitely had 3 devices. And eventually it's either 3 or 4. After that, they just stopped giving you refurbs and they give you a brand new device. Yay. Finally, be aware of your products, especially the ones you depend upon, and know what might happen if an update impacts you in a negative way, not only in practice, using the approach I just described. So, do your research ahead of time. Keep your ear to the ground, as they say, but also as a matter of preparation. What would happen if I updated my phone and it became completely unusable? Or what happens if it just fails on its own and becomes completely unusable or bricked so that I could never access anything on it after? And that was the case with the Nexus failures. Whatever I had on the phone was done. Any pictures not synced, any files, anything, done. What would happen if I updated my car firmware and the brakes suddenly didn't work or didn't work as well? Understanding some of these seem complicated, even complex, but the alternative might be a shoulder shrug at the jetway as you attempt to board your flight with a bricked phone. Like, I just was updating it while I was waiting to board, and now it doesn't work. And my boarding pass, my travel itinerary, all that stuff's gone. And we can only hope the aircraft is not receiving an OTA update at the same time. Wouldn't that be a hoot, Boeing? So there you go. I just find it funny. I just did something yesterday on my phone or the day before, and I saw that bug fixes and performance improvements. And it always makes me shake my head because it shouldn't be that opaque. You should have some idea what you're getting yourself into if you do apply an update. And there should be an easy way to connect there. If there's an update that addresses 10 things, 10 bugs, or what performance improvements are they? Well, here are the 25 performance improvements. You should be able to comment or provide your feedback on any or all of those individually, right? You can say, oh, number 3 didn't actually work, or it actually caused other problems, or it stopped. Some problems are not only with the user profiles things, but accessibility tools often are under tested. There are use cases on older devices because they don't recognize the difference in battery capacity or charging speeds. It may be the charger. What if your charger is not providing enough current? What if you have a charger from 2 phones ago that you're still using? Because they don't ship charging blocks anymore, you're basically using charger, like USB charging things you plug into the wall. They may or may not provide the current that modern phones really require to charge and operate at the same time. So there are all sorts of things that might pop up because testing is only getting more complicated, and some companies don't have the resources or the time or the wherewithal or just the capacity or competence to do this to a degree that you really need as a customer who depends on this product. So this is the sort of thing where the crowd will feel the pain, but should have an avenue to express that pain and to make sure it is fixed. Just my opinion. So that's what I'm thinking. We all got to sort of pay attention to our devices, and we got to hold the companies to account when they break things. And we got to communicate with each other to make sure that we all kind of see the different facets. Like, oh, I'm using it with a, fill in the blank. It doesn't have to be a phone. That's the most common one. It could be just about anything. Get out there on the internet, find out who's using similar products, similar services, and see if they're having the same problem as you. And by the way, don't ever settle. Don't ever shrug your shoulders and say, well, I guess maybe it's something I did, right? Hold them accountable. That's where we're going to leave today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. Take care until next week. Watch out for those products. Take care.